we're going to talk about the top 10 things you want to avoid when you're making your first hire or your next hire. And it's broken down into 5 sections, really. There's, it's not just hiring, right? You've also got to, get them trained. You got to get them into the position and keep them in the position. So the sections that we're going to dive into, there's 5 parts. It's recruiting. So how do you find talent, right? Selecting talent is number 2. That's how do you actually weed people in, weed people out. Then we need to train them. So we need to onboard them. We need to train them. We need to make sure they understand how to do the job and set them up for success. And then, of course, we need to understand how we can lead them going forward until the last one, number 5, is motivate them. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into this topic right now. All right, so let's get into the recruiting piece. The first thing you want to avoid when you are making a new hire is doing so without clearly defining the role. You need to make sure not only that you understand what they're going to do, but they can understand what they're going to be doing. It's critical that there is no gray on what the activities are. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is finding someone who's good, but them not understanding exactly what the job entails, and you hire them and you train them, and only to find out maybe 3 months, 6 months, 7 months in, they're not willing to do a certain aspect of the job, or they can't, and that's what you needed them to do. So make sure you understand exactly what you're getting into. And to be frank, if you can't explain what success looks like in 90 days, you're probably not ready to hire. Now, you might be ready to hire, but you shouldn't actually make the hire until you can clearly articulate that. So let's be clear with tasks, expectations, and what a win looks like in the role. And just a bonus, if you're not really sure, let's say you're making your first hire, or you're currently doing the job that the next person is going to be doing, just start to look at your calendar. Document everything that you are currently doing that you no longer want to do. And that then becomes a list of things to do for the next person that you're going to hire. All right, so don't make it easy to apply. Now, if you've been hiring for a long time, a lot of this stuff might seem like old hat, but I really want you to pay attention to this section. It is huge. It's one of my favorite things. I call it the brick wall strategy. You see, what I'm going to try and do is put a brick wall in front of the candidate. Okay, and I'll explain some simple ones and then we'll get a little bit more complex, but I want to make it challenging for this person to get the job. Okay, so when someone faces a brick wall, they've got a few options. They can break through it, they can climb over it, they can go around it, they can figure something out, right? They can get a friend to throw them over the damn thing. I don't really care what they do as long as they figure it out. But many people will hit that brick wall and then they'll turn right back around and leave. And I think this is actually a good moment for us to say this piece. This is a fact that I've found in hiring and interviewing is no one will show up at a higher level than they do during the interview process. So let me be super clear. They might be better, smarter, faster at what they're doing, but in terms of effort and really truly wanting to impress you, it's the top during the interview. Okay, so if someone makes a mistake during the interview, maybe in terms of effort, and you're like, well, it's just one moment. Well, you need to understand that's probably the best version of that person you're ever going to get. Now, people make mistakes and they have bad days and all that. So let's be clear. When I'm interviewing candidates, I want to, typically meet with them at least 3 times before I make a hiring decision. And what I like to say is like, even someone who's crazy can, pass the crazy test twice. Crazy usually gets flushed out on the 3rd try. So typically if I'm meeting with them 2 or 3 times, or 3 times at least, I'm going to understand what their behaviors are, how often they make mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. So let me be clear what I'm trying to say going back to they're never going to show up at a higher point than they do during the interview. I just really want you to be very focused on what they're doing. Like, do they show up late? If they show up 2 or 3 minutes late to an interview, what do you think they're going to do after you hire them? They're probably going to continue to show up late. But instead of 2 or 3 minutes, it's going to be 20 or 30 minutes, right? So at the very least, if they show up late during the interview, you need to confront it. That's another thing I like from a leadership standpoint. Call it early, call it often. So the very first time they show up late, ask them, like, do you always show up late? Now, I know some of you might think that's a little uncomfortable to be able to do that, but I can promise you it's so much easier to have that conversation during the interview than it is after they start working for you and they're showing up late every single day. And, we all have roles that are, not all of us, but there's plenty of roles that you can't be late at all, right? Maybe they're working retail and they've got to open the store, or they're meeting with clients and there's zero room for error. So this is something you want to flush out and just recognize their effort level is at the highest during the interview. So that's when you need to be the most critical, because they are showing up at their highest level. So you need to be scrutinizing at the highest level and until you guys have some trust. So what's a brick wall? Let's look at this a little bit further. Sorry for this brief interruption. I wanted to let you know that in case you're getting value and you're not in a position to take notes right now, we actually took notes for you. We've compiled the best from this episode and we put it on one-page document. And you can find that and many more items for free at the link in the description. Now back to the rest of the show. I have this in there. If they can't follow basic instructions, they won't handle the job. So we add friction to the process. So let's say you're posting on Indeed. I was just doing this presentation in front of a chamber here locally, and I asked them, like, who's posted on Indeed recently? And the feedback I got was they had 200 to 300 applications. So if you're getting 200 to 300 applications on Indeed, how do you have time to go through all that? Well, this brick wall strategy, which is relatively common, but I'll show you how you can plus it a little bit, gives you the opportunity and the authority really just to weed most of those out without even doing much. So how do you do it? This is how you do it. You're going to ask them to do things in a specific way. So you can ask for a resume in a PDF format instead of like a Google Doc or a Word document or whatever. You can require a specific subject line. So be sure to mention Bob the Builder, or whatever your company name is in the subject line. We also like to include 2 to 3 questions that they need to answer in the application. So if I'm getting 300 applicants to one Indeed ad, and I put this criteria up, hey, attach a PDF resume, answer these 3 questions. And by the way, the questions, they're largely irrelevant. You could ask them anything like, hey, what was your favorite job you've had in the past? Or what was the hardest thing you ever had to do at one of your previous employers? Tell me what's your top 3 strengths and top 3 opportunities, the areas that you need to improve in. It doesn't really matter. I want to know that they're reading the role, right? They're reading through it and they understand what I want. Now, this particular brick wall would be for someone who is in an administrative role. Maybe they need to pay closer attention to a detail. If I'm hiring an executive assistant, I want to make sure they're not going to miss anything. So, and I can tell you from experience, you get 300 applicants, you're probably going to get maybe less than 10% who actually do everything you ask. I'd be shocked actually if it's more than 5%. So of those 300 applicants, you're probably going to get 15. And I've always wondered, like, why is this, such a crazy thing? Like, why don't people try during the application process? I've found that sometimes when someone's on unemployment, they're required to apply at a certain amount of jobs every week. And I think some of these applications are just satisfying that requirement. So don't be the person who's wasting your time on someone who has no interest in your job. Put these pieces of friction in place that easily weed people in or weed people out. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other brick walls here in just a second. All right, so we're still selecting. Here's another thing this is actually the selection section. You can do this during your interview process as well. So we went from recruiting, like how am I going to find people? Now we're talking about selecting. Now I'm meeting with them. So just a quick point that I want to make here. It's not in the presentation, but I really want to make it for you is I want to do a screening with them. So let's say I went from 300 applicants down to 15. Now my goal is to go from 15 to maybe 3 to 5. Okay. Let's just say I'm going to meet with 3. That's my goal. I want to have a screening interview. And if, depending on what your organization size is, I would have someone else do this for you. And if I do have someone else do this for me, I usually just tell them like, hey, is this someone you'd be comfortable working with every day? Are you comfortable with them coming into the office and sitting next to you and working with them every day? And a lot of times just in a 5-minute conversation, you can find out like, oh, this is not the candidate for me. And what kind of questions do you ask? A lot of people really obsess over that. I'm a little less concerned with that in the screening interview. I'm just screening people like, hey, where else are you applying at? Awesome. What'd you think of our company? What was your favorite thing about our company? Like you're going to find out, did they do any research? Do they even care? If someone's not researching your organization, then it's probably just a job, right? But if they are researching your organization and they know some things about it, it's probably someone who's looking for a career. And, given the choice, do you want to give someone a job or a career? Most people are going to choose the career. Most employers are going to want someone who wants a career with them because that's going to mean longevity and loyalty and, you can grow them and build them and help them out in the future. All right, so let's get into the selection piece a little bit further here. All right, don't hire just because you're overwhelmed. I call this hiring from pain. When I'm coaching business owners and business leaders, this is a huge mistake they make. They are so overwhelmed in their role. And so what do? Well, they typically choose the first person that comes to them and they say, come work for me. And then, whatever, a couple weeks, couple months, sometimes even a year down the road, it blows up, right? And usually if it took a year to blow up, it's because they didn't fire them fast enough. But they don't spend any time looking for people. And in fact, shout out to my brother, Blake. Blake and I have had conversations. He owns a landscaping company. And he's like, Chase, you don't get it. You're in a profession where professionals work and I can't attract professionals in my career. All I get is, he's in landscaping. So it's hard labor. A lot of times you shovel and whatever. You're working physically every single day, and a lot of people don't want to do that job. That's his belief, right? And I'll be like, well, based on what? And he's like, the only people that apply are, whatever. They don't have driver's licenses because maybe they had too many DUIs or, they are a felon or whatever. And so I ask the question, I'm like, well, what are you looking for? And he's like, I'm looking for someone who can run a crew and they need to be, have their stuff together and they need to be a little bit more professional, et cetera. And I said, okay, how many hours do you work a week? He's like, 80. I mean, he's working a lot. This is quite a while ago, by the way. This is an older story, but I think it's very applicable here. And he's like a lot, 80 plus hours a week. And I'm like, awesome. So, and you can't find anyone. He's like, no, dude, no one wants to work in landscaping. And I said, okay, of those 80 hours you're working per week, how many of them are you spending looking for talent? And that silence right there is exactly what showed up on the other end of the phone. It was effectively 0, right? He put an Indeed ad up or a Craigslist ad up or something like that, and that's it. And all you get is, these crappy candidates, right? Or these people that aren't qualified or people that can't do what he needs them to do. So when you're selecting, one of my mentors taught me, he's like, if you want 1 in 100 talent, you need to go interview 100 people. And if you're working 80 hours a week and you need talent, you need to allocate some of that time to finding talent. So finding them, recruiting them, right? Now selecting them, like who are we going to choose and why? So just because you're overwhelmed, bringing someone on who you have to babysit will cause even more overwhelm. So be very careful that you don't get a mismatch of values or poor long-term fits. Slow down and choose intentionally. All right. Now this one isn't necessarily 100% true. It says don't hire someone just like you. Just be careful, right? If I'm coaching or mentoring a sales leader, typically the sales have this big personality. They love to chit chat. They are very influential. We call them high eyes from the DISC profile. These people love to talk. And so when they get a candidate who also loves to talk, they're best friends. And then, of course, they're like, this is the best possible hire ever. And so then they hire them. And then what do you think the problem might end up being there? Well, if you said they're going to just talk all day long and not work, that is one of the biggest problems that you run into, right? For that specific scenario. So, understand your personality. I think that's a big piece. Like, how do you lead? How do you communicate? You can go take some of these assessments, like the DISC assessment. It can be great to understand more about yourself. And this will help you identify other people and their traits and how you guys might work together. So just because they're just like you doesn't mean they're necessarily the best hire. This also doesn't mean you can never hire someone like you. So just full disclosure, be careful. If it's your first hire, you should be looking for balance, right? If you're not good at detail, you probably need someone that can do detail. If you're really good at sales, you probably don't need someone that's really good at sales. You might need someone that's good at operations or, just making sure you're on time to things or whatever. So there you go. There's a DISC assessment. There's like 50 different ways to go take the DISC assessment. There's a lot of free ones online. I'm not going to make any recommendations. I think you just go do some research. And I think most of them are going to tell you kind of who you are and how you show up. Some go into greater detail than others. There are free ones out there, so go Google that and find out. All right, back to the brick wall strategy. I love this brick wall strategy. Now you're putting some friction up during the interview itself. Liking someone is not a long-term hiring strategy. Give them some practical tests. I'll start with sales because that's the field that I'm in. I hire a lot of sales agents. And, in the real estate world, having a database is key. And even if you just move to an area brand new and you have no database, you have to build a database. So here's a brick wall that I would give an agent right now. I'd say like, hey, agent, how many people are in your database? And, they say like, whatever, 20. And I say, okay, how long is it going to take you to get to 50? And they might be like, I don't know, a week. And I'll say, so in 1 week, you can add 30 more people. You'll get their names, their phone numbers. I'll even give them like something I want them to say, some sort of talk track. And how many, can you add and talk to with this specific talk track between now and a week from now? They say 30. And I'm like, okay. So now they've picked the number. They've also picked the time frame, and I've verified it. So between now and next week, you're going to add 30, right? They say yes. Now, this is how you can select and really weed people in or weed people out. I'll say, great. So, Mr. Candidate, can we agree right now that, between now and next week, if you don't come back with an additional 30, 50 total, then we're not a fit to work with one another? And just listen, see what they say. You're going to establish a couple of things. The first one you're going to establish is that you expect them to do what they say they're going to do, and you're willing to hold them accountable, which a lot of people, by the way, are looking for accountability. They want someone in their world who can help them achieve their potential. So a lot of people are looking for that. And by the way, if someone's not looking for that, you need to decide, are you looking for them? Or do you want someone that you're going to hound to get stuff done each and every single day? So yeah, this is a brick wall. Yes, this is challenging. Yes, this might feel uncomfortable, but I can promise you from experience, and I probably should have said this from the beginning, most of everything I'm going over here, I have learned by failing at not doing it or doing it the wrong way. So it's been my failures that I guess I'm bringing forward to you in this, this specific education that we're talking about around hiring. It's through failure that's done this. So if you want to go hire people and then decide later like, oh crap, they don't do what they say they're going to do, you can wait until after you hire them to find that out, or you could just do what I'm asking you to do here and just do it during the interview. I can promise you one of those is easier than the other. And that's an IQ test. I hope you pass. But give them practical tests, guys. It's going to be huge. I think it will really pay off in the long run. So if it's a salesperson, have them either role play a client call with you, or gosh, we've had people call for a few hours. Hiring for certain, we call them inside sales agents. So we have leads coming in. They need to be calling those leads. We have them, make 1,000 dials, right? Or we have them call for 2 hours. Because if they can't do the job during the interview, again, knowing that they're showing up at the highest level during the interview in terms of effort, there is no way they're going to do the job at a high level once you actually hire them. They're not going to get better in terms of their effort, right? It's only going to go downhill from there. All right, ask them to complete a task they actually do in the role. When we're hiring VAs for video editing, for videos like this, we give them raw video. And then we give them an example of what we want the finished product to look like. And we say, hey, here's the raw video. Make it look something like this. Go. And we're doing that during the interview process. Much, 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 much better to find out they can actually do the job before you hire them than waiting till after. The other thing to do here while you're setting up these brick walls is give them deadlines. I don't like to tell them when things are done, but I do like to make sure they commit to a deadline and then I hold them accountable to it. So if I give them this raw video and I say, hey, how long is it going to take you to edit it? And then I just listen. If they're like, oh, I could probably get that done in an hour. I'm like, cool, when would you have time to do that? Oh, I could probably do it tonight. Okay, great. So by tomorrow morning, you could have this edited? Yeah, I could do that. Awesome. Can we agree that if you don't have this edited by tomorrow morning, then we're not going to be a fit? And, again, I don't know if that sounds harsh. To me, it's reality. Like, you are hiring someone to do a job. They are telling you when they can get it done by, and you're going to hold them accountable to doing what they said they're going to do. So this, by the way, goes hand in hand with leading people. All right, so diving back in here, set a deadline, see how they handle real world pressure. So much better to do it during the selection process. All right, lastly, don't leave compensation or job expectations vague. Ambiguity leads to resentment. So people want to know what they're going to get paid. They want to know how they're going to get paid. They also want to know what the path looks like to moving forward. Be upfront. Is it salary, hourly? What's the potential for the role? And what metrics are you going to hold them accountable to? Okay, so we've already gone over recruiting. Like, how do you find people? Indeed, word of mouth. Oh, by the way, here's a bonus one. Sorry if you're watching this and I'm going out of order. It's just the way my brain works. When I remember these things that are important to you, I want to tell them. So here's another really cool thing you can do. If you're hiring an executive assistant or a salesperson or something like that, you probably already know someone who would be amazing at the job, but they already work for your friend or they work for some other competitor and they won't leave. Here's a pro tip, okay? So we're back to the recruiting world. Let's say it's, their name is Tommy. So Tommy's the best executive assistant you'd ever seen. And in fact, if Tommy was available today, you would hire that person on the spot. So call Tommy and say, hey, Tommy, my coach asked me to think of the best executive assistant I could possibly think of, and you're the first person that came to mind. Now, I know you would never want to leave because you're happy at XYZ company, but I'm just curious, if you had to replace yourself today, who's the first person you'd call? Because I want to give them a call and see if they would work for me. Now, this does a number of things. It's going to flatter the person. Okay. It's also, if they're not happy at XYZ company, maybe they'll want to talk to you about working for you. And then, of course, lastly, they might have a referral for you. And at the very least, you're letting them know you're looking, so they'll keep their ear to the ground. Really cool pro tip. So we've gone over recruiting. Then we talked about selecting. How do we weed people in, weed people out? You're going to ask tons of questions. You can just go on Google and ChatGPT and figure out all the questions you want to ask. Actually, let me close out selecting too. Here's one of my favorite things. Another massive, massive, massive pro tip. One of my mentors came to me and she said, Chase, hiring is not about finding out if someone can do the job. Okay, that's table stakes. Duh. They have to be able to do the job. That's not what it's about. It's about finding out, can they do the job, right? First and foremost. But most importantly, what do they suck at? And can you live with it? Now, that might not mean much to you right now, but I can promise you it's one of the most critical pieces to me in hiring. And so much so that during the interview process, I will ask the candidate that exact thing. I'll tell them exactly what I told you. Hey, my mentor said, it's not about finding out if you can do the job. You seem like you can do the job really well. It's about finding out what do you suck at and if I can live with it. So I'm just curious, what do you think you suck at? Or what do you think, where's your greatest areas of opportunity, right? And I will tell them if they, a lot of times they're like, oh, well, I'm, too perfect or whatever silly thing they might say. And I'll just say, look, I have learned that if I can't find the red flag, like the thing that, I really need to understand what is wrong with you, if you will, then I won't hire someone because it means I haven't asked enough questions. And guys, that is a huge, 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 huge feature, right? A huge, huge takeaway. If you can't find out what the red flags are, you probably haven't been digging enough. Or there's such a professional at interviewing then you might be missing things. So if you can't find red flags, tell them and see if they'll flush out their own. Or bring in a friend of yours, a colleague. That's another great way to be able to get a second set of eyes on a candidate. At 2, 3, 4 interviews, whatever. During one of those interviews, don't waste your friend's time, right? Make sure you've already done the job. Like that's a big pet peeve of mine, by the way. Someone's like, hey, can you interview someone for me? And they've never met with them. No, I won't. But I will after you've gone through the pain of meeting with 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 100 candidates. I will help you, once you've weeded it down to like the top 1 or 2. And I'll ask questions and give you feedback. But do the work. So you've done the upfront work. Now you can bring someone in for another perspective and see if they can flesh out some of those red flags. But that's the biggest piece. What are the red flags and can you live with it? So that's bonus tip number 2 there. So we've gone over recruiting. Like, how are we going to find all these people? We can throw on Indeed. We can go on Craigslist. We can ask for referrals. We can think of the people we already know who would be great at the job and ask them if they know someone that would replace themselves. Now selecting, we're going to set up brick walls, put things in the way, make it really challenging for someone to get this job. That's key. So let's go into the third thing, which is training. Now what? Don't skip onboarding and expect magic. Even if you're a brand new company, it's just you. It's a one-man or woman show. Do not skip onboarding. You need to spend time with these people, okay? Even the best talent needs structure to thrive. So you've got to be willing to slow down to help these people. They're not going to be able to read your mind. Okay, this is something I actually really enjoy, is having a 30, 60, 90. I really want to make sure that I'm telling the candidate up front, like when I hire them, hey, this is a trial, right? You're new to me, I'm new to you. Every 30 days for the next 3 months, we're going to check in with each other. We're going to see what's going well. If you're liking it, if I'm liking you, if we're a good fit to work with one another. And, after we get past the 90-day mark, then it becomes official that you're officially part of the company. And some of the things I would encourage you to consider, let's say the salary is $50,000 or so is what you're going to be paying for whatever the role is. Something you can do is step that pay up over that time period. So look, I'm going to hire you today. You're going to start at $45,000. And then after the 90-day mark, we're going to go up to $47,500. And then once you hit 6 months, you'll be at the 50, and that's where you'll be at once you're officially part of the team. It's a great way for you to maybe save a little bit of money, and you're going to be training these people. They're not going to be fully effective for 6 months anyways. So most of the candidates understand it, depending on what the role is. Now, if they've already been in that same exact role for a long time, you might need to just start them at whatever the appropriate salary is. But if they're learning and growing with you, I think it's a great way to step it up. So, all right, let's keep getting back into training here. Don't keep everything in your head, obviously. And depending on how you operate, you might need to have someone who can pull the information out of your head, right? And what I mean by that is they can literally, you give them permission, like, hey, you have to take things away from me. You have to take things off my plate. If I'm not, I'm not going to be the kind of person that just tells you what to do every day. In fact, this reminds me of a story. The story is about the message to Garcia. And I'm going to butcher the story, but you can Google it and get the whole story. It's an awesome story, but it really just goes something like this. They're on a battlefield, and this commander needs to get a message to Garcia. He's like, I need to get this message to Garcia. It's critical for us to win this battle. And someone runs up and says, I'll get a message to Garcia. And they grab the message, and they go. Now, notice what they didn't do. They didn't say, who's Garcia? Where do I find him? Where's he at now? When do I need to get the message there? How many days do I have? What if I'm late? There's none of that stuff, right? It's just, give me the message, I'm gone. Tell the person this during the interview. I guess back up. What kind of leader are you? Are you the kind of person that wants every single day to tell this person what to do and how to do it? Which I arguably micromanaging, maybe not. Or are you the kind of person that wants them to be thinking of things and figuring things out inside of your big business? And if they run into a brick wall, they climb over it, or they go around it, or they call a friend and get a boost over it. What kind of candidate do you want? And most of the entrepreneurs I know, they want someone that's going to get a message to Garcia. Right? So, this is just good food for thought. Here's a system, a different system, by the way. So when you're selecting, you can obviously do the message to Garcia thing. But here's another system you can use to help document pieces. So when you're brand new, you're hiring your first hire, they're going to be doing all sorts of stuff for you. And while they're figuring it out, you can actually have them create their own SOPs, right? So it's going to help them reinforce the training they're learning, right? Whatever it is they're doing. Like, hey, this is the way that this is our standard operating procedure. That's what an SOP is. This is the way that we invoice. This is the way that we do a CMA. This is the way that we file receipts. It doesn't really matter, but if they're creating an SOP, it's going to cement in their mind how to do it. It's also going to set you and them up for success down the road if you ever need to replace them. And I'll tell you, replacing doesn't always mean that you're going to fire them and they're going to quit. That could be the case. And if you have SOPs, then someone coming in, it's even easier for them to do the job. But it could also mean as your company starts to grow, they're going to need to do bigger and better things, and they can't do that until they replace themselves. And it's going to make it easier for them to replace themselves if they have SOPs they can just hand to a new hire. So really, really key way to do it. Here's another bonus, especially for administrative assistants. If I'm assuming you are the entrepreneur and you're hiring the person or the business owner or the leader or manager or boss or whatever, and you're hiring the person, one of my favorite ways to connect with that person over the first 3 to 6 months is every single day. I have them write down, they can text me or Google Chat or whatever systems you're using. If you're in the same office together, they write them on a Post-it note and they set them on my desk right before the day starts. I come in, I pull up that Post-it note, I see their top 3 priorities for their job today. Now, this is what's critical. I want to get inside their head. And more importantly, I want them inside of my head. So I get their top 3 priorities. And by the way, it's usually not my top 3 priorities for them, right? So they tell me what they are. And then I might ask them well, what made you think that? Or what caused you to choose those? And then oftentimes I'm scratching them out and I'm actually, I want you to work on 1, 2, and 3. And you do this every day for the next 30, 60, 90 days. And what's happening is you're developing a lot of trust. They're understanding what's important to you as the business owner or the leader. And so they start to get in your head. And usually after 30 days, most of the priorities are spot on, right? They might be a little bit off, or they might be, the best candidates I've ever had, within a week and a half, they are, boom, spitting out the exact same stuff that I want. And I've had others that's taken the full 90 days before we're kind of on the same page. And then, of course, some that just we never get on the same page, right? But that's a great way for you to connect with them. So great way to start the day. And then, of course, you can end the day by getting an update from them on what they actually accomplished. So closing the loop, they can say, hey, here's my top three priorities for the day. You go and adjust them. And then at the end of the day, they're like, hey, this is what I got done. Next morning, new top three priorities. You're going to adjust them. This is what I got done. Great way for you to just build in a system for training. Plus, it puts it on the candidate to come to you. The candidate's bringing me the top three priorities. The candidate's telling me what they got done, right? Or they're not a candidate now. They're I guess they're on the team at this point, but they're still a red shirt or a trial employee or whatever until we get done. All right, now we got to lead them. So we're doing a little bit of training. We're getting some things in writing. We're making sure that we're on the same page. Now we got to lead these people. So there's two ends of the spectrum here, right? You can micromanage every little thing that these people do. Or you can literally disappear and never talk to these people ever again. And I've seen both, and both of them end up usually being a disaster. So don't be the MIA. That's the worst. Micromanaging is way better than being MIA, because at least the micromanagers around, and they're getting at least some guidance. But the MIA, gosh, you hire someone. This is a common thing I get in coaching. I'm like talking to a business owner. I'm like, hey, have you ever had an executive assistant? They're like, oh yeah, I tried that, didn't work. I'm like, tell me more about that. Well, I hired them. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know anything. Blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay, well. Let's pull up your calendar. When did they work for you? Pull up the calendar. 0 time spent with them. 0 time, right? Like, oh, I didn't spend any time with them. And a lot of times people will hire someone with experience and they'll be like, well, they knew what they were doing, right? But no one knows you. No one knows your business. No one knows what you want and how you operate. So don't go MIA. And then in terms of not micromanaging, give some people room to achieve things, right? If you hire talent, they need room to work. All right, so regular check-ins are great. I think that's why we talked about those, that process from the 3 priorities for the day and then closing the loop at the end. Another thing from a system point is closing the loop. So one of the things I learned early on from one of my admin, actually, at the time I think I had about 4 people in the operations team, and one of them was now leading the other 3. And I'll never forget this. It was a great lesson I learned from my admin. So one of the people that worked for her had said, gosh, Chase micromanages me. And anyone who knows me like really well knows that that's not really what I do actually at all. But what was happening is I would come to them and I'd say, hey, did you get XYZ done? And they'd say yes. And I would do that about 7 or 8 times a day. And I didn't even think anything of it. Like, to me, it was just like, hey, did you get XYZ done? And they were thinking I was micromanaging. By the way, I didn't tell them how to do XYZ. I didn't tell them, none of that. None of that existed. I literally would just come in there and be like, is this done? And the other admin who worked for me and had been working for me for a while told this person, and I just got a chance to hear it later, but they said, well, why do you think he comes to you? And the admin's like, well, he doesn't trust me. And she's like, okay, is there any other reason he would come to you? And they're like, I don't know. And she said, well, what was the task he gave you? Well, he told me to do X. And she's like, did you do it? And she's like, of course I did it. And then she said, did you tell him you did it? And she's like, well, no. And so I didn't see it as a problem on my end because I said, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? And then I'd come back and be like, did you do X, Y, Z? And I guess I was moving so fast, I didn't stop to think like, hey, can you close the loop? Come to me and tell me you're done with something, and then I won't ever check on it again. And this person who worked for me actually taught them that. And it was a great lesson. Closing the loop is the system. Super simple, right? You can't read their mind. They can't read your mind. So if you're giving them tasks, make sure they're closing the loop and letting you know that they've completed a task. This can be as simple as blind copying you on an email. It could be a quick text. It could be anything. It could be a daily download that you have with each other on like, hey, here's the 7 things you told me to do. I got these 6 done. This one's going to tomorrow. So whatever the case may be, just build in systems so it doesn't feel like you're micromanaging. And of course, you won't be MIA because they're coming to you with things. You just need to make sure if they are coming to you with things, you're actually following up on it. So if they give you 3 priorities for the day, you're actually reading the 3 priorities and giving them feedback. So that's the MIA person just like ignores it. And then all of a sudden that person's sending you 3 priorities every day for 3 or 4 days in a row. They didn't get any feedback and then they just stop. And then the leader 2-3 weeks down the road says, well, hey, where's your priorities? Like, make sure you're engaging. Don't ask them to do something if you're not doing anything with that information. And build in simple systems and put it on them to bring them to you. All right. So let's keep going through this here. Let's get into the motivation piece. Don't forget to coach, to grow, and to appreciate your people. One of my mentors taught me a long time ago. She's like, how do you know if someone needs motivation? And I was like, I don't know, tell me. And she's like, if they're breathing. Everyone needs motivation, and they always need encouragement. So reward the behavior you want to see. If someone's doing a great job, and I'm talking to myself as much as I am to you, make sure you shout it out. Make sure you tell them how good of a job they're actually doing. It's super, super, super important. All right, people leave when they feel stagnant or unseen. So go out of your way, make sure people are feeling seen. Praise effort, recognize wins, and talk about what's next for them. And I think we're going to end it there. That's one of the biggest pieces I think you can walk away with is knowing that your people want to know what the path is forward. Okay, there are plenty of people right now who are working at a different company for less money than what they could probably earn somewhere else. But it's because they get more from the company that they're with, right? They get more recognition, they get more growth, they get more better community, maybe there's a better culture. They get the things they need out of it. Money is one of the pieces of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So probably one of the biggest things I could tell you is if you are leading the organization, what's your vision for the organization? Is it going to be exactly what it is today? And by the way, if it is going to be exactly what it is today, then recognize the people who come in that want more than what you're offering are going to leave. So if you can think of a vision bigger than where you're at today, and then think about what that means for the person who's coming into your life in terms of them having a bigger vision after they get in business with you, that can be huge. That can help them row in the same direction that you're rowing. And oftentimes you already have it in your head. You just need to take a moment to articulate it. So here's a couple pro tips on how you might be able to do that. So as an example, let's say today it's you and this one employee. That's where you're at today. And let's just say you're, you have gross profit of $200,000. And your goal in 2 years is to get to $1 million in gross profit. So now work backwards. What does the organization look like? Is it still just you and that one person? Or do you need more people now? And if you have more people, does that mean that there's leadership opportunities inside your organization and maybe more money that could go around to that person that's getting into business with you today? Right? Just a quick example, 200,000 to $1 million, maybe you need to hire 2 or 3 more people in terms of operations or administration or whatever. And the person who started with you could be the person that leads those other people, and they get some additional compensation along the way. Right? Or maybe you're going to be expanding into different areas and, they can go into another area and lead. There's all sorts of opportunities here that you might already have. You might already even know exactly what you're going to do. Are you sharing your vision with the people in your organization? Because it's a great way for you to motivate these people. So thank you guys so much for sharing this journey with me, all about hiring. I want to know, I'd love some feedback from you. What's your favorite piece from this? what did I miss from this? I mean, when it comes to hiring, there's so much we could talk about. And I know we didn't get into everything here today, but I'd love to know, what are some tips and tricks you have? What are some things you have learned from this and you're going to implement right away? And what are some fun stories as you do implement these things? I'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us on all of our socials, comment on the YouTube, and let us know what you guys are taking away from this.